Welcome to the Childfree Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bree and Dr. J, Certified Financial Planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners, it is that time of year again. It is the end of the year. I don't know about you, but this year has been a long one for me, and that's 2025 at least. And I've got Scott here. Scott's one of our certified financial planners and Childfree Wealth specialists. And Scott and I are going to talk through, what's that end of the year checklist look like? And we're going to dive into some different things that we both look at for clients, for ourselves, and things you should be thinking about as we get to the end of the year. Scott, what's the first thing that comes to mind to you? Like, hey, we're kind of that end of the year, last month or two. What's the number one thing you jump to?
Yeah, the thing that I jump to probably right off the bat would be looking at potentially doing stuff that we call tax loss harvesting, gain harvesting, and also potentially looking at other things like 401k contributions and making sure that everything's going there. But the tax loss harvesting and gain harvesting are really the things that come to top of mind right off the bat.
Yeah, and we're going to pull that apart because it's 4 different tax things you just threw in there. So we got to, you went down the deep end to go for it. Let's actually start with the 401k one first. And I want to use an example of this. So I have a client who started a new job middle of the year. And one of the questions is, hey, did you contribute to your 401k, your previous employer, and end up with too much? Or in her case, she hadn't worked earlier in the year. Do you have to max it out over the last couple of months? And I've had a few clients do this because what happens is there's a limit, and we'll go over the limits in just a second. But if you don't make that contribution by the end of the year, it's gone. Is that kind of what you're thinking about?
That's 100% correct. Yes.
So talk through the limits for 2025.
The limits for 2025 are $23,500 for 401ks, 403bs, 457s, and the like. And that's for people that are under age 50. If you're over age 50, there is a catch-up contribution provision that allows you to contribute another $7,500 toward your 401k or 403b. And even on top of that, for clients that are age 60 to 63, there's sort of a supercharge provision that's sort of added where potentially instead of $7,500, they could put in another $11,250 on top of the $23,500, but only between those ages of 60 and 63.
Yeah, and now it's kind of weird, this little cutout in the middle where you can put in extra. Now, is that kind of, was my birthday this year, or I'm halfway through? How does that impact it?
It's basically if your birthday falls within the year, that's 60 to 63. So if you are between 60 and 63, you could do that basically additional $11,250. Same thing if you turn 50, again, you have the $7,500 that you can add additionally. As long as you turn 50 within the tax year, you can make contributions for that additional $7,500 throughout the year.
Yeah, and just a technicality on this. If you're listening to this now in 2025, those are all the rules. They change in 2026.
Yes.
And I say this is one of those that's changing day to day, it feels like. And 2026 is when we're going to start seeing the catch up having to be Roth instead of traditional. It's one of those little kind of quirks that you've got to be aware of.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, Scott, take me through tax loss harvesting, tax gain harvesting, there's a lot of things in there. And by the way, if y'all haven't caught up yet, I'm going to keep asking Scott a whole bunch of questions because this tax stuff can be confusing. It's also a great place to work with either a certified financial planner or a CPA to work through your tax plan. So Scott, talk about tax loss harvesting gain.
Yeah. Tax loss harvesting is really the idea of if you have losses that are embedded within, say, your brokerage account, you can use those to offset any gains that have occurred throughout the year if you take distributions. So if you take a distribution from your brokerage account and you have, say, a $10,000 gain, but you also have a asset within your brokerage account that has a $3,000 loss, you can offset that part of that $10,000 gain with the $3,000 loss. So your ultimate gain in that circumstance would only be $7,000. The key with any of this is, these are all things that you would be potentially talking again with your CFP about, but we would also want to circle in a CPA to make sure that it makes sense to take that gain or loss this year. It may be something where based on your income this year, it may make more sense to wait till next year to take those gains or losses. But that's one of those things that when you're working with a CFP, usually they will coordinate with your CPA in order to help you manage those items and make sure that we're doing the right thing at the right time.
And just a technicality, we're talking about using a tax professional. If you're doing tax loss harvesting, gain harvesting, we're doing anything fancy with your taxes more than just like you've got a W-2 and you're just submitting it, you really want to work with a professional. Like I've spent so much time every year trying to quote unquote fix things that, TurboTax, others, those work great. If all you got is like a W-2 income, you throw it in, you're done. But you really need to work with somebody as a professional, a CPA and EA, because you can make mistakes that actually cost you more than the entire money you made. And sometimes, I'll give you an example of this end of the year thing that can be a mistake. I had a client who, his whole thing, he was trying very hard to keep his taxes low. He was trying to keep his taxes low because of the ACA subsidies. Now, mind you, right now, we're recording this in October of 2025. Right now, all the ACA subsidies are scheduled to go away. That is also what the debate is around the government shutdown. So by the time you hear this, that might change. But what happens is if you're trying to keep your taxes low for the ACA subsidies, you could actually end up paying more taxes over your life. Now, let me explain how this works. This is where it gets weird and why you got to work with a professional. There's a portion of your money in capital gains where you can actually pay zero tax. And it's kind of weird because you like say, hey, I'm going to pay my taxes. They're going to say it's zero and you don't actually pay taxes. It's just kind of how the system works. So if you're trying to keep your income really low, you may be better off actually doing some sales of stock. That way you see the capital gains, pay zero. And even if you lose a little bit of the ACA subsidy, you end up paying less total taxes. What we're talking about is really tax planning. It's not about keeping your taxes at the lowest this year, but it's about keeping it lowest across your lifetime. Because sometimes you can make decisions now that actually hurt you in the future. What do you think about that, Scott?
Yeah, 100% right on. I mean, it's a really big deal to make sure, again, that you're working with somebody to help navigate some of these issues. Because again, it's really about your lifetime taxes, not just about what's going to save you money right now. So it really makes sense to do that, to work with your CFP, work with a CPA and EA, and try to get those two groups coordinated together so you can really maximize the planning that's being done on your behalf.
Yep. Now I want to go into some more end of the year tax stuff. And by the way, it's not going to be all about taxes today, but there's going to be a lot of taxes. Talk to me about RMDs, because this is one of those that people sometimes miss, and not necessarily intentionally, but it's got a pretty big penalty if you miss it.
Yeah, it is a big penalty. It actually, with the most recent big bill that passed, it has been reduced from 50% down to 25%. But if you are age 73 or older current, you're required to take required minimum distributions by the end of the year. So that means that you have to take that certain amount by the end of the year. And if you do not take that out, so let's say you have a required minimum distribution of $20,000. If you don't take that this year, you're going to be penalized 25% of that amount. So in that example, you're going to be penalized, what's that, $4,000 that you're going to have to pay in penalties that would end up needing to be, it would be $5,000 that you would end up needing to pay in penalties on that 20,000 missed RMD. That potentially could be reduced if you correct it quickly, but at the max that would end up being applied to as a penalty would be 25%. So it's not insignificant and it's a big deal. The other thing I would want to point out is that also applies potentially to inherited IRAs. So inherited IRAs also are subject to potentially RMDs, depending on when you inherited the IRA. Prior to 2020, it follows a little bit different rules. But since 2020, if a person passed away in 2020 or later, they're now potentially going to be required to take RMDs. And there's some small differences between somebody that's a qualified person and then somebody that is like a son or a daughter of the person that passed away. But if a spouse has a little bit different rules than, say, the son or the daughter does. But those are all things that potentially would be an issue for those clients.
Yeah. And by the way, if you inherited an IRA, you need to work with a professional to figure that out. There's this chart, and I swear this chart gives me nightmares because it's like this weird thing of qualified, unqualified, how many people, what type, and how many years, and this. And it's like, oh, I got to follow this through to figure out which one this is, what year it was there, whether or not your family member that it came in from was getting their RMDs or not. Like, there's this weird thing. And every time I have to like pause, overthink this, follow the chart, and then go, okay, here's what it says. And it's one of those things where I don't know how non-professionals are supposed to be able to figure that out. Because you're like, oh, I inherited grandpa's IRA. Great. Well, how does that get treated? It's also different if we're talking about Roth, traditional. Like, it is a bit of a challenge. But if you inherited money anytime recently and you have not been taking RMDs, once again, we got to fix that. This is one of those, like, people like, you have to have a plan. There are some times when you can not take it. Like, for example, from your spouse, there's some ways you can do that. But you need to have a plan for when you're taking that money out. Like, it is one of those things that often trips people up. And it is one of the more complex things to figure out. All right. So we got inherited RMDs. The other one from our folks that are kind of 65 and older, when I get to the end of the year, I'm doing tax planning based on IRMA surcharges. Now, IRMA surcharges are extra money you pay for Medicare. Why? Just because that's the rules. Clients get so upset because they have to pay a surcharge. Now, the surcharge, it's not a huge amount, but it is per month. And sometimes you're better off taking the surcharge versus not. Like, there's an issue here because particularly if you had large income this year, or you had to take a bunch of money out to like buy a house, you can run into this. How do you look at IRMA surcharges, Scott?
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners, it's Bree. If you haven't already signed up for our newsletter, be sure to get on it, where each week we send out information regarding what's going on in the world of child-free life and finances. You can sign up by finding the link in our description.
I see them as really not a huge deal. I know clients take a different approach to that because, again, they want to pay as minimum amount as possible toward their Medicare premiums, which I completely understand. But if you did have to take a large distribution or your income is large enough that you do get applied these IRMA surcharges, it's really not, in the grand scheme of things, it's really not a huge difference in the amount that you're paying overall. So I really don't see it as too much of an issue, but it is something that we need to address when we're talking to clients, because if it's not expected, if they're used to paying this certain amount every year, and now all of a sudden, because of a distribution they took, they're now going to have to pay more on a monthly basis, that does throw them off. And especially when you're in retirement, a lot of people, it varies based on the client, but a lot of them are on fixed incomes. So knowing exactly how much they're going to be paying each year is a really big deal to them.
Yeah. And this year we're seeing some pretty high jumps in Medicare Part B, Part D as it works through. And it's interesting. There's a clause in the Social Security language that says, it's called a hold harmless clause, that says, look, if your Part B premium goes up by more than the cost of living adjustment, they're not going to lower your total monthly take home from Social Security. And it's one of those we don't normally run into, because what we have to have in that case is we have to have Medicare costs going up by more than cost of living adjustment. We may be close this year. Have you been watching that, Scott?
Yeah, I've been watching it. I mean, well, unfortunately, we haven't gotten exact numbers yet and seen exactly what it looks like, and it can vary. So we'll just have to see what happens. It's very much like the potential healthcare costs that are going to be going up this year, either through open enrollment or if you're on the ACA, what the ACA plan prices will be going up to this year.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, and if the rules on the ACA plan are not changed, so if that subsidy goes away, if the rules on Medicaid cuts don't go away, I think we're going to see an even bigger healthcare jump in 2026. You on the same thought process?
Yeah, unfortunately, that seems to be the case. Obviously, that's what Congress, again, as of today, Congress is still shut down, or the government's still shut down. They're trying to work through something to help extend some of those ACA subsidies into next year. We'll see what ultimately happens. We don't know as of yet. But yes, you can expect that if those subsidies do go away, the healthy people that are on the plans are probably going to say, well, I just can't have a plan because I don't have enough money to pay this premium. And they're going to drop off. And the only people that will stay on will be the unhealthy people, which will drive up the cost of insurance for everybody.
Yeah, the other thing that happens to the cost, and this is one of those particular around kind of Medicaid and some of the other things, if you show up at an ER, you will get treatment. Just kind of the rule, kind of how it works. But if you don't have insurance, they'll bill you, but they're never going to get any money. Well, what happens is the hospital then says, well, I got to make the money somewhere, and they raise the rates on everybody. And it's one of those things that we haven't talked about in a few years because of the ACA. But the more uninsured people use the EED, the higher your rates go. It's just how it works. I don't want to get huge political on this, but the way it works is we will pay for that healthcare one way or the other. Just how it works. All right. We didn't talk about IRAs. So for IRAs, I actually like to do the contributions beginning of the next year when I know my actual income. Is that the way you handle it, Scott?
Yeah, it certainly can be. Everybody's a little bit different. Some people will do it after that they've seen, because you have up till the tax filing deadline in order to make the contribution for the prior year. That's certainly a way you can do it. There are some people that like to just do sort of monthly contributions because that's the way they do it, and that works just as well. But usually it makes a lot of sense to wait till the next year just because you know exactly how much your taxes are going to be, or you should have a very good idea, and then you can plan for that by making the contribution and choosing which way to make the contribution in 2020 or the following year.
Right. And remember, with your IRAs, there are limits. So this is that question of, can you make a deductible traditional IRA contribution or Roth? It's all based on your income. If you're over the limits, you can't. Now, a lot of folks go, well, but I can do a backdoor Roth. These drive me crazy because people talk about it in financial shows just like this, but there's too many steps that can go wrong. If you're going to do a backdoor Roth contribution, I don't like you to do it alone. And here's the reason. You need to have an IRA, traditional IRA that has nothing in it. Then you make a contribution. Then you can move it to your Roth, and you have to file an 8606 form with it. All right. There's a bunch of steps in the middle there that people usually miss one or two. Like they're like either they file the 8606 or they have another traditional IRA. And by the way, it's any traditional IRA. You know, it's not like you could just start a new one at Fidelity and like, oh, I've got zero in it. Nope. And once they make a mistake on it, it takes a bit of work to undo that and clean it up. This year, I haven't had as many as last year. Last year, I don't know what it was, but we found quite a few clients that had all these issues with backdoor Roths. And I'm like, all right, we're going to now spend 3 months cleaning this up because that's how it has to. I mean, that's what it takes essentially. And I tend to say it's not worth the work, even though it's a good financial concept. The amount of tax work, just maybe not. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, it's one of those that can be a tough call. It's sort of the return on hassle quotient for me. It's like, does it make sense to be able to contribute that after-tax amount and then do the backdoor Roth for that $7,000 or $8,000 if you're over age 50 that you can put in? It's sort of a tough call there. I would probably tend to say that it's not necessarily worth it if they're even considering a backdoor Roth or can make enough money to consider one. So it's probably not worth it in many circumstances. And one of the other things, and this is to your point of not being or having an IRA that's open, that also includes, because some people will look at it and think, oh, well, this doesn't count. SEP IRA, that's going to count against it. So you can't have a SEP IRA. You can't have a rollover IRA. So if you had an old 401k and rolled it over, it's considered or called a rollover IRA, but that is considered a traditional IRA in the eyes of when they're calculating if there is an IRA that's open.
Yeah. And this is where I tell people, look, investing can be very, very simple. We talk about doing a 3-fund portfolio, set it, forget it, no big deal. And actually, if you're doing a 3-fund portfolio, set it and forget it, you're probably not going to have anything for tax gain or loss harvesting unless you're taking money out. What happens is once we get into tax planning and some of this, it just gets hard. It just is. And that's kind of how it works. And I had a client ask me why do they make the system so hard? And I'm like, I don't have a clue. Like it's thousands of pages of IRS documents, and we have to go through regular training on this. And we were talking about that RMD one, inherited RMD. I've been in at least 3 sessions on that one and, trying to explain how this works. And I'm like, I'm glad I have the chart, it's just, I don't know, Scott, do you have a reasoning of why it's so hard?
Unfortunately, I do not. So I wish I did. It gets more complicated every year. And again, all these different bills and changes that occur, they all add a new twist to it. And it changes everything every year. And I mean, one thing it does do, it keeps the accounting industry in business for sure. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it definitely keeps everybody on their toes.
So let's shift away from taxes for a little bit because I've had enough of that. Let's talk about the end of the year. And there's an exercise I like to do at the end of every year. And it's probably one of the most painful exercises, but yet the best. And that is an audit of my spending. And here's how I do it. I take everything I spend. Now, the way I spend is we usually put things on the credit card. We pay it off weekly. So our credit cards never have a balance. But what that allows me to do is the credit cards give me a summary of everything. So I will take that summary and look at every dollar I spent over the year. And the first question I'm asking is like, did that dollar help me somehow? Did it connect to my values? But my other bigger question is, do I remember what I spent that money on? So if you're looking at something, you're like, what the heck did I spend $400 on in March? Chances are that was not mindful spending. That was something you just mindlessly bought. And what I'm really trying to do is take a look and see, is my spending going towards my goals? Now, notice, I'm not saying, am I spending too much? I'm saying, is my spending going in the right direction? In some cases, it's I need to spend more on something. Like, for example, I've been very mindful over this year to spend a little more on just fun things for me. Yeah, I'm going to a boat show in a couple of weeks and going to go have a good time. And I'm spending more money than I feel comfortable with, but I'm doing that so I can have a little bit of enjoyment. And I know I need to do that. It's not always I need to cut my spending. That being said, at the end of the year, I'm also doing my subscription audit. Let's call it that. I'm like, why am I still paying for Apple Plus when I don't watch that thing except for one show? All right, look, I have this thing about Apple Plus. Like they don't have enough shows for the whole year, but I'll buy the rest of the streaming services. But I'm looking to see, am I spending the right money? Do I have subscriptions that I should cancel? Do I have things that make sense? The other thing I'm doing towards the end of the year is if you're going to play the credit card game, and if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. You got to pay it off each week or each month. You got to never have a balance. But if you're playing the points game or the discount game, are there any benefits I have not taken advantage of? My wife and I just went out to a restaurant this week. We have the Amex Platinum. You get $100 a quarter on Resi. We went and got a free dinner this week. Why? Because I need to do it for the last quarter. And we were going to dinner anyway. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure my spending matches my values. If you want to go one step further, you take all of your spending and then you make a separate chart and go, what value does this connect to? What you're going to find is you may find there's a lot of stuff you're spending money on that does not go towards your values, your goals. And that's where it's like, oh, I really want this trip to Paris. Cool. Do I want the trip to Paris or do I want DoorDash? And I hate to pick on DoorDash. Well, we use Uber Eats more, but whatever. You get the concept. I hate to pick on them, but I'll tell you right now, the easiest way to double the cost of your food is to DoorDash it. It's just, you're like, it's one meal, it's $20, $40, $50, whatever it is. And then you look at the end of the year, like, how did I spend thousands of dollars on DoorDash? Like, that's what I'm doing when I'm doing this analysis. And by the way, if spending money on DoorDash matches you and your life and your values, great. Although I'm not sure many people are going to say that. Scott, what do you think about doing this spending analysis at the end of the year?
No, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, there's a lot of things that we want to take a look at. And to your point, stuff like DoorDash, mine, unfortunately, is Amazon. I mean, I couldn't tell you what I ordered from Amazon 2 weeks ago, but I know I got stuff. And it's like, what value did that bring to me? And do I even remember what it was? And that's something that we should all do on a regular basis. It makes a lot of sense to do this sort of inventory to figure out, it's like, is this building to what I want to get to? Is this, if I want to take that trip, great. You might still be able to take the trip and do Amazon, but could you have used that to go first class instead of regular, like coach? That's the type of thing that you need to think about when you're looking at those expenses over the year.
Yeah, I didn't even talk about my Amazon because that's just an area of shame for me. My wife's like, we got a package. I'm like, yeah, don't ask.
I don't even remember what it is. Like,
yeah. Amazon has been so good at getting us to spend money that, like, just, mindlessly clicking and, what's that whole, I'm sad. So what do I do? Click add to cart. And this year, maybe a little too much. I'm with you. Now, let's talk about a couple other end of the year things I like to check for clients. So what I use the end of the year kind of as like do you have things in the right place? And one of the ones I want to talk about is, do you have an estate plan in place? And has it been updated? About 25% of the U.S. have an estate plan in place. Now, estate plan includes your medical power of attorney, your financial power of attorney, your will, and a trust. You don't always have to have a trust, but in some cases for child-free people, it can be helpful. And that has to be up to date and signed. Now, the key there is up to date and signed. If you've printed it off and put it in a drawer and you've never signed it, it is useless. So the question is, do you have an estate plan in place? And now if you don't, here's a couple things I want you to do. As a child-free person, our estate plans tend to be very simple. You give your money to a couple of your, my nephew's got what's left over to some charities or whatever. It's not a big deal, but you need to have it in place, because if you don't have it in place, you're choosing for the government to make the choice for you. Scott, do you want the government making the choice for you?
Heck no.
I'm just saying, I don't care your political leanings. Nobody wants the government to do it. So you can actually use services like freewill.com to get it done. And yes, it literally is free. Free Will, what they do is they make money off of charities that are like begging for money. You'll go through their system. They're like, do you have a charity you like? No? Let me recommend one to you. Hey, it works. But you can get the documents done for free. The problem is you need to know who to put down as your executor, medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, trustee. And that's hard for child-free people. This is the question of who do you want to be your fiduciary? We call it the fiduciary void. So that's that question about who's going to make decisions for me as we're older? End of the year is a great time to think about this, because if you look at your plan, you're like, hey, I put my mom on there. Well, my mom passed this year, and my mom didn't, but I'm just using an example. I didn't just kill off my mother this week. But if your mom passed and she's listed on there, it's not a good choice. I've also had some folks look at it and go, ooh, yeah, I had my friend Jane in there, and Jane and I have not talked this year. So you may need to make the changes. We're launching a service we call Childfree Trust. Childfree Trust is a nationwide solution specifically for child-free or permanently childless folks that fills the fiduciary void. We do what we call life and legacy stewardship. So we fill in that blank, and we are the medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, executor, and trustee. We provide the estate planning documents. We also create what we call care documents that tell us how to take care of you over time. That's really important. And all of our documents include a trust. And now somebody emailed me like, hey, I'm child-free. I don't have a big estate. Why the hell do I need a trust? It's a good question. I give them credit. And it's a question of the purpose of the trust. So we have a series of estate attorneys we work with. And I met with one of them, and he said, look, every time I've ever made a trust document in the past, it has a purpose. Every trust document has a purpose. And the purpose for every trust I've ever made is to protect the money for the next generation. I said, that's not helpful for us. He said, your trusts are designed to protect the person themselves, not the beneficiary or the person getting the money after. Yeah, the person getting the money after, it is protected, but it's a question of who comes first. Like, for example, in our documents, it says, hey, spend the money on me and my care. And if the person after me gets nothing, it's about me. That's a priority. And that's important to have in place. And the end of the year is one of those times where you want to make sure you've got your paperwork in place. You got your parents' paperwork in place. It's all up to date. What do you think about once a year doing an estate check, Scott?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to do that. Something we also see, and I know you see it as well, is that a lot of times, especially child-free folks, they'll make a move within the year. And if they move to a different state, that actually will usually require you to update those documents, because a will in Tennessee is different than a will in California. And making sure that everything is up to date is very important when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah. And in this current political time, it's never been more important. We need to do that. And the other part of this, and this is going to sound bad, but just go with me for a second. We just finished a survey for child-free folks looking at their estate planning. We found that about 75% of child-free people have pets. Not everybody, but a large percentage. The question is, if you get hurt, who lets your dog out or feeds your cat? That's the question. If you're not going to do it for yourself, how about you do it for your pet? And now that sounds ridiculous, but I know that a lot of people listening are like, ooh, I'm more worried about my dog than myself. I mean, I jokingly say that if me and my wife in a car crash, she's going to be more worried about my dog than me. She says that's not the truth, but I know the truth. And that's part of what we've done with Childfree Trust. Is part of those care documents is if you go to the hospital, we're acting as your emergency contact. We're acting as your medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney. And we call your pet sitter and say, hey, by the way, you got to let the dog out. It sounds silly, but these are the things that matter. It also includes a pet trust. How do we make sure the pet actually gets the money when you say, hey, here's who gets it? If you don't specify it, you're going to have a problem. And if you don't have a will, medical power of attorney, all that, you're in the hospital, whatever, you're unconscious, you can't respond, you're just not 100% there, and you're in there for a week. What happens to your pets? That's where I start worrying. I mean, Scott, I know you got your cats, and is the pet a big worry for you?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we definitely want to make sure that our cat's taken care of if something were to happen. Certainly something that's a concern, especially if something happened to both me and my wife.
All right. We gave you a lot of stuff to think about at the end of the year. We'll include a link in the show notes on how to actually download our end of the year checklist. You can go through it. We'll also include a link to Childfree Trust. You can get your estate paperwork in place. If you haven't gotten a Childfree Wealth checkup, we have those also too. So it's a great time at the end of the year to have that checkup with somebody. Go, ooh, I want a professional opinion on this. But the bottom line is you got a bunch of paperwork things you got to do for the end of the year. And hopefully this has been helpful.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Please let us know your thoughts wherever comments are available or email us at media@childfreewealth.com. To stay up to date, find and follow Childfree Wealth on social media. If you're interested in working with us, learn more by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.